kill each other, the police are on par with that right now, every 36 hours, right? Which is astronomical. So now let's just kind of dial this back to this time, where not only is this happening, but this is being reinforced because of stereotypes that are now just showing up full-fledged at the highest levels. The president wants to see blackface. The senators think that we are all backwards and shiftless and every type of stereotype that you can think of. There is no alternative to this. And black people are being lynched left and right. Not only are they being lynched, but by 1919, 1920, 1921, you have a series of race riots. And I think the term riot is misleading because it implies that, 12 people from one side came and started fighting 12 people from the other side, and they duked it out, and somebody got the best of each other. It's more like a massacre. A bunch of folks came over to a part of town and started going on. Right now, 2013, the president didn't say nothing, even as he's dropping drones and building a drone base in Africa and being the most powerful person in the world. Even as we have black Congress people, the Congressional Black Caucus that considers itself the conscience of Congress. You didn't have no meetings, you didn't have nothing. But this went on. So I'm only trying to paint the picture to say that if that's happening now, what do you think was going on back then? Where they just were like, you know what? We think you were looking at this white lady, lynch him. And when a lynching happens, have people ever seen the postcards that they put out? Have people ever seen those pictures? So they used to send postcards in the mail of lynchings. And you would see little kids there watching, smiling, pointing, standing next to the body. And before people were lynched, they were burned and their testicles cut off. Well, thank you all for being in the classroom. And and as soon as
thanks a lot, family. Don't worry about the black tape.
All right.
Now, is this a class?
Yeah. Say hello to the class. Say hello.
Hey, class.
Hey, class. I don't know what a class is. Where are you?
I'm in San Francisco, my brother. San Francisco State. There you go.
The Bay Area.
Yes, sir.
Where revolution seems to start.
Let me start off with you first, Hakim. We've had this conversation, we've had debates, we've seen you debate the role of the artist in 2013. First of all, does an artist have to have a role? And if so, why is it important that he or she be challenged on that?
Okay, I'm gonna use two quotes to make the point. One is from Paul Robeson. Every artist, every scientist must decide now where he stands. He has no alternative. There is no standing above the conflict on Olympian heights. There are no impartial observers. Through the destruction in certain countries of the greatest of man's literary heritage, through the propagation of false ideas of racial and national superiority, the artist, the scientist, the writer is challenged. The struggle invades the formerly cloistered halls of our universities and other seats of learning. The battlefront is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. That's Paul Robeson. The other quote comes from Daruba bin Wahad, who's a personal mentor of mine, former Black Panther. Everything's political. It's all politics. And what that means is that politics is about relations and your relationship to centers of power. Even when you think that you're not being political, someone benefits from your lack of politics and someone gets disenfranchised because you're non-political. So it's all politics. It's understanding where you stand in the fray and then moving from there. A lot of the artists out here who claim to be non-political are very, very political. They serve the purpose for the financial elite that run the music industry. And what does that mean? America is funded through privately owned banks. These banks, there was an audit of the Federal Reserve last October, and it was discovered just from this one audit that there's $16.1 trillion missing from our economy. The reason why we don't know that is because we're distracted by a bunch of fools and buffoons. If we paid more attention to real issues like the amount of intellect and critical thinking that goes into football, baseball, and basketball is off the charts. It's actually harder to keep a fantasy football league or be successful in a fantasy football league than it is to understand politics. But they have gotten us to trade in what's right and good for us for what's bad and dumb for us. And it's all based on politics and what we value.
Spice, what would you add to that, especially in the context of the letter that you wrote to Clear Channel, the letter that you wrote to World Star Hip Hop, where you pretty much demanded that they step it up and really understand the crisis at hand?
I think my brother just spoke for me. But the truth of the matter is that World Star represents what Clear Channel represents. And that's basically them pretending to be the voice for the voiceless. Basically buying up every single radio station and billboard there is in the country, and those who benefited cash-wise, there was a lot of guys who held us down for 40, 50, 60 years, a lot of black radio station owners who understood what the culture was and where it was going. And, you know, thanks to hip-hop and R&B, I think they made a lot of money. They started selling, they sold their radio stations to Clear Channel. Clear Channel said, okay, good. We're gonna rebrand this rap stuff and call it hip-hop. It was only, most of it was just rap. There were very few hip-hop records on the radio. And as far as I'm concerned, we've always had this fight. We've always had this problem of hip-hop not being served on the radio. I remember Public Enemy with an ad in Rolling Stone magazine. 2 million sold, no thanks to black radio. So they were saying then what we're saying right now. They never respect the yes man. Now the whole thing is lost because of this guy who wants to sell his soul to a radio station. I think that we are perceived the wrong way. And there's a whole lot of us who think the way Hakeem thinks. The thing is, we just don't have a platform anymore. But again, we've never had a platform. And now that the platform has gotten bigger, now that the platform has become internet, now the suckers are taking control of the internet, and all they have to know is a little bit of the language, and they can type what they want to type, and they're in. Well, the problem here is that they don't know that we exist, and I'm glad that World Star and a couple of these other so-called hip-hop websites are popping up, because now they have to be challenged, and they gotta prove to us that they're really hip-hop, because I know Hakim knows, I know Davey D knows, and I know who hip-hop is and what hip-hop is, and I can't be led by no dollar signs at all to play hip-hop out. I know that it's a culture. I know that that culture not only represents who I am, but who my children are, who my grandchildren will be, because this is a culture that we created. This is a culture that we have to preserve.
Let me kind of put this in context, because you're using the word hip-hop and rap, and I want to put this in the continuum of this debate around art and the challenges that come. So keep in mind what we talked about with the Black Arts Movement.
So I do I speak to young folks all the time, and when I explain to them what hip hop is, I explain to them that hip hop is not what we do, but how we do it. It's how we see ourselves, it's how we relate to ourselves, it's how we communicate with each other. Now, coming out of the late 60s, when the riots were happening, when there was a lot of social protests, there was a cultural revolution taking place, the Kerner Commission was put together to identify why were black people rioting. What was found is that it was a lack of services, educational services, social services, employment. Our neighborhoods had been divested. There was divestment to the point where our neighborhoods were crippling, and something had to be done. But nothing was really done. Affirmative action is, Dave, I'm sure will go into why affirmative action isn't what everyone thinks it is. In New York City, because of divestment in the school system and social services, organizations like the Universal Zulu Nation were created as a response from the lack of services and infrastructure. When Cool Herc did a free park jam, it was to give young folks a place to express themselves, because there really was no place in the South Bronx where you can express yourself in a controlled environment, a safe environment. When you look at what DJs do, and that whole art form comes out of no music programs in the schools. When we look at breakdancing and phys ed and sports and physical activity, like this is how we took Kujichagulia is a Kiswahili term. We know it from Kwanzaa, and it means self-determination. Hip hop is truly poor people's expression of self-determination. There was a code and an ethic created through the Universal Zulu Nation. There was a rite of passage that was created which brought young men into adulthood. It's not just about rapping. That's the biggest hoax that's been played on us in the last 30 years, is to make us think that hip-hop culture is about rapping. Hip-hop culture is so much more than it really is a unifying force amongst poor people from 1972, 1973 until the present.
I want to just build on that when you said a unifying force, because here a lot of people would be skeptical. I'll say I don't see that, but having traveled the world, you have seen that. We've seen that in France.